Yes, welcome in. Badgers through 3 practices of spring. I was only there for one of them. So, going to be leaning on Jesse here for the next half an hour or so as we look into these first 3 practices. The Badgers have had a lot of new faces. I will say, Jesse, it's an absolute impossibility to know every single number at this point. And I walked in there yesterday and was constantly staring at a roster trying to figure out who was who and what was what.
That's how I was on day one. I reminded every spring of the great movie Major League when they're looking at the roster. Who are these bleeping guys? Because there's 33, 32, 33 new scholarship players. Guys who've been around have changed their numbers, as we've discussed. Tucker Ashcraft is 11. But like every rep, I found myself staring at the white piece of paper they produced to figure out who is who. So you are not alone.
Yeah, and they've got defensive linemen wearing 30s, like in their 30s. Like again, it's just not necessarily, and it's not easy. I'll say that it's not easy, but I did. And one of the questions we got for the show, we're going to have listener questions coming up later on, was did Zach have FOMO not being able to see the first 2 practices? And he did. He absolutely did. Again, I know basketball is probably slightly more important at this point, but that didn't make it easier because I'm a visual learner, Jesse. If I hear something, I can hold on to it. If I see something, I can hold on to it. When I read stuff, I don't always hold on to it. So I read all your stuff. I trust what you see, and I trust what Colton sees. So I read everything that you guys put out there, but maintaining it and keeping it in here, a little bit difficult. So we are going to dive into all of it. Before we do, Home Field Apparel, the official apparel sponsor of the camp. They have the best vintage gear in the game, in the world. 180 colleges plus, 180 plus colleges. Some really fun new stuff they got over there. So check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code Badger24. All right, let's dive into this. First impressions. And I wanted to start where everybody cares to start, and that'll be at quarterback because we have a brand new quarterback room to talk about. So many new faces, except for Milos, insert last name here. The other 3 are new, and that would be Billy Edwards and Danny O'Neill and Carter Smith. And it sounds like throughout the entirety of these first 3 practices, and again, I was there yesterday, the lineup is Billy Edwards, Danny O'Neill, Carter Smith, and then Milos.
Yeah, I would say that Carter and Milos have kind of split reps with the 3s. It's very early in the spring, so you want to get everybody involved, but certainly they brought Carter in potentially to be the future. I'll start with Billy Edwards Jr. I think it's important to note this is not this early an offense that's airing it out, throwing it 50 yards down the field. I think it's more predicated on a lot of some pre-snap motion, testing the eyes of the defense, being more physical. And when they do throw, a lot of the throws have been of the intermediate variety. Shorter throws, screens, yes, but 10 to 20 yards. And I think that's where Edwards has a chance to really thrive. He's put some good balls on some receivers. There were a handful of 15 to 20-yard throws on day one. And the one that stood out to me at practice on Tuesday in practice 3 was a throw that he put on Vinny Anthony. They did a lot of their 11-on-11 work from the 25-yard line in. So it wasn't like they were driving the length of the field. They didn't do that at all on Tuesday. But he put about a 20-yard pass right on Anthony, right in front of the safety, down to the 5-yard line. And so I think those have been some areas where Billy Edwards has been good. There's still, to me, some times where he's overthrowing his receivers. A perfect instance on Tuesday is a pass to Vinny in the right side of the end zone that he had him. He just overthrew him out of bounds. Again, I wouldn't expect perfection this early in the spring, but I think for what they needed to see so far early, he's been good. With Danny O'Neill, he's definitely on the smaller end of quarterback play, which they knew when they went and got him. He's got some mobility, and he's got a year of starting experience, so you can't discount that. I don't know if I've seen necessarily a ton from him, but you get him on a rollout and things like that, and I think he can be very effective. And Carter Smith, while it's very early, I go back to day 2. Yes, it's all coming against the 3s, but man, his arm strength, his mobility, the just general ability that he has for a true freshman, it does raise your eyebrows, and specifically some throws that he made to Eugene Hilton Jr. But I just really like what they have with him, and even the ability that he seems to have to put people in the right spots, like when Gideon Atuka is lined up in the backfield and he can move them around and things like that. So it's obviously very early, but it's a good quarterback group so far.
So I'm going to throw a couple overreaction or no's at you as we go through this entire thing. I didn't. The only one that I've actually thought of to this point is the quarterback one, but I'll be good. Overreaction or no? Billy Edwards Jr. is the best transfer quarterback that they've had in these last 3 years. So essentially, Tyler Van Dyke, Tanner Mordecai, Braden Locke, and then throw in the others that were here. But at this point, through 3 practices, putting you on the spot.
Yeah,
that's just what we're doing. Well, because we talked about this they were talking about this in the stands yesterday. So go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say it's an overreaction after 3 practices. Like I can't say that I've seen enough to make that clear determination. I would certainly put Tanner Mordecai number 1. I don't know what that Wisconsin season would have ended up like if he hadn't gotten hurt. It's not like they were playing great before that, though. You saw what he was able to do when he just cut it loose in the bowl game. For who he was and what Wisconsin needed in that system, I think I'd still put him number 1, but I certainly reserve the right to change my mind with 12 more. I think 11 more open spring practices and fall camp. But I do think that they got the type of quarterback that they definitely needed for this kind of offense with Billy Edwards. Maybe I'll put him at 2 right now, certainly based on what we've seen early, because at least with Tyler Van Dyke last spring, it was a little slower coming along. And obviously at the time it was a competition with Van Dyke and Braden Locke, and they went all the way into fall camp. So I suppose at this point I put Edwards 2.
Okay. The running back spot is one where I think there's at least some questions. We thought Darian Dupree and Dylan Jones and Cade Yakimelli would be the top 3, and that's exactly what it has been. It felt like at times, at least on Tuesday, that Cade Yakimelli was getting some of the first reps. I know that was not the case, at least on day 1, where it's been Darian Dupree and then Dylan Jones, and just based on what you had written. So, but I still like it as a 3-headed monster, but the overreaction, no question, is going to be about Cade Yakimelli in a second. But what have you seen from the running back so far?
Well, day 1, Darian got the first reps. I saw on Tuesday more of Dylan Jones getting some of the first reps and Darian getting some 2s. They're obviously just still in the very early phases, but there's a reason why Wisconsin didn't go to the transfer portal, and certainly why they weren't able to acquire a high school running back, as they went and got 3 the previous year with those 2 and Gideon Atuka. But I would expect those 2 to be the top 2. But I also think Cade Yakimelli has to have a role this year. I don't know what that role looks like. It's still, to me, inexplicable that he went the last 5 games without touching the ball, with the 8.3 yards per carry, with the fact you throw him in for 1 touch against Northwestern and he gets a touchdown. He has earned the right to have a role. I just don't know what that looks like, because Darian is certainly more dynamic as a pass catcher, and Dylan Jones has a lot of potential. But I think this offense will be best when all 3 guys are playing.
Overreaction or no, Cade Yakimelli will have more than the 33 carries that he got a year ago.
No, that is not an overreaction. I think that he will, and ultimately, all we're saying is 3 carries a game. So, I don't know what the split is going to look like, whether it's just straight up 50-50 with Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, or I can just see Cade coming in for a handful of snaps.
My question is, who kept him off the field last year?
Well, Tawee Walker and obviously Darian Dupree. Well, Tawee Walker was the starting running back for the last 8 games.
Cade Yakimelli was better.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say he was better. He showed flashes of being an impact guy, and it didn't matter. So who kept him off the field last year?
Well, I suppose the answer
you called it inexplicable that he was not on the field. Someone kept him off the field. The running backs coach is the same. Offense coordinator is different. Head coach is the same.
Yes. Well, obviously last year when Luke was talking about it, they wanted to have fewer guys in the rotation to try and get more of a rhythm. And maybe that'll be the case this year, but it's also a different kind of offense. And I also think, so that was a tough situation, because the 3-game winning streak, Tawee Walker was otherworldly. He had 400 plus yards rushing. He had 6 touchdowns. And so maybe they just thought, okay, this is the guy we're going to get moving forward. Well, the last 5 games, they averaged 3.5 yards per carry as a team. They had 1 total rushing touchdown, which you should say, well, that's the case. Why doesn't Cade get more touches? I do think he's in a better position, though, but I'm not saying he's going to be the starter, but if you're saying over under 33 or 33 and a half, I think he'll get more.
I wasn't giving you that overreaction or no, not over under. I said he will have more than 33 carries.
I'm going to say yes.
Carries. Okay. All right. So that is not an overreaction. All right, moving on. Sorry, not trying to be defensive. Just trying to.
Okay.
Just trying to make
my opinions. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. But at least they come from an educated place, hopefully.
No, but like I'm not talking about your opinion on Katie Akameli. I have no issue with that. I'm just trying to keep the games straight here, right? Like if we're playing over under, that would be okay. I'm being a little.
No, I get it. I get it. But
okay,
it's essentially the same question of will he have more than 33 carries?
Yeah, but it's not the game we're playing.
All right. Okay. Fair enough.
I'm sorry. We have to respect the integrity of overreaction or no in this setting. Okay.
Without rules, we have total anarchy. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
Right. So moving to wide receiver, I guess we're just going to go position by position. Moving to wide receiver, the news on Tuesday, Tretch Kekahuna done for the spring, had a boot on his left foot / ankle / whatever is going on there. We didn't get a specific injury with him, but he is done for the spring, and he is expected back for fall camp and all that good stuff. And I suspect he'll be back probably sometime in the summer to be able to work out. But I mean, he missed a bunch of time as a true freshman with this with an injury that at least made him wear a boot for a large stretch of fall camp and into the season. So not great that they lose him, but there have been some other guys that have certainly stood out. Jaden Ballard, Eugene Hilton Jr. Chris Brooks Jr. There have been some guys that have stood out for you.
Yeah, obviously Vinny Anthony is your number one guy on the outside. I think the slot is now certainly much more interesting in spring because it's going to give Kyan Barry Johnson more of an opportunity. And the guy that earned the biggest opportunity was Tyrell Henry, who they were putting in the slot. And he took advantage of it. He had a 3-yard touchdown catch. Again, a lot of these drives started inside the 20 or the 25, had a touchdown run. So that's a spot that they did not put him in last year. They viewed him as an outside guy. Obviously, he got hurt. I think he played 27 offensive snaps. I looked this up on Pro Football Focus, and 25 of the 27 came on the outside. But you look at him in general, and it just seemed like, well, he could be an effective slot guy. It's just that they had Will Pauling and Tretch Kekahuna a year ago. So maybe he'll be able to take advantage of that. On the outside, I think Jaden Ballard might end up being the guy, but we're only 3 practices in. I do know that they have targeted him a ton. There have been some fantastic one-on-one matchups with him and some of the DBs, and it seems very clear that they enjoy talking to each other because you see a DB make a play and they are in his face, which probably means that when he makes a play, he's in their face. So he had a 50-yard touchdown catch at practice when they were inside the McLean Center on Saturday. So he's made some plays. It just seems like they are heavily targeting him, but obviously there are a number of guys out there. Mark Hamper, I think, can make some noise. Eugene Hilton Jr., again, with the 3s, and they can line him up in the slot too. I really like him, but they have 10 scholarship wide receivers. So without Tretch, there's 9. And a lot of those guys are going to get opportunities, including a Quincy Burrows, maybe Joseph Griffin. You can go on down the list.
The Joseph Griffin thing was interesting. He had that one-handed catch that was ruled out of bounds. I went back and looked like
touchdown.
Yeah, it was
from Carter Smith, by the way. What a dart that was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great catch, and they ruled it out of bounds initially. But when I saw the video, went back and looked, he's got one hand, he's got a foot down. It was a catch. So he's a big body guy that they brought in for a reason last year, and at least the one practice I saw, he made an amazing grab. The Eugene Hilton Jr. one is interesting. It's where my overreaction or no here is with this group is overreaction or no. Eugene Hilton Jr. will not redshirt.
Ooh, what a good question. I'm going to say that is, I'm going to say no, that's not an overreaction.
Okay.
I think it's tough because you can see people flash in the spring and it absolutely never translates. But for a true freshman to kind of pop out like that, and we've heard when we had Billy Edwards Jr. on our show, he mentioned Eugene Hilton Jr. among the guys. And obviously, I think they think pretty highly of him. And so I can see him having a role. I also think we're in an era where if you're good enough, you don't sit guys. Now, maybe that ends up being a special teams type of role. I don't know, but I can see him having some type of impact at wide receiver.
Him wearing 13 was not good for me because every time I saw it, I thought it was Darian Dupree. And actually when Wisconsin posted, oh, look at 13 making all these catches, I'm like, whoa, they're using Darian Dupree. And Eugene Hilton Jr. wearing 13, Darren Dupree now wearing 6. But if he's ready, he's ready.
Mhm.
And it is a little of a backlog there. It is a little bit of a logjam there with Wisconsin having a number of guys that I don't know have like that separated themselves from each other. So I guess we'll see. So again, 3 days in, tight end Tanner Koziel has looked the part to this point, at least. I saw a great couple catches on Tuesday, but it sounds like he was that same type of player last Thursday and on Saturdays too.
Yeah, this is why they went and got him from the transfer portal. You look at what he did at Ball State, and the numbers are obviously off the charts. He had 8 touchdown catches, but all 8 of them came in the red zone. Well, he's 6'6". We know he's up to 257. He gained 20 pounds in the offseason. I think that's where he can be most effective. Now, he can be effective all across the field, obviously. He's a nice safety valve. If they want to throw short or in the intermediate range, he's going to catch the ball. But he went and got a pass, and obviously Wisconsin put it on its social media accounts, so you can debate whether it was a catch or whether it was taken away by Austin Brown. But either way, he leapt up. Austin he kind of had his back to the ball, and Koziel leapt behind him. It was a really athletic play. And then he also caught a 13-yard touchdown pass. I think it was maybe up the seam or over the middle or something like that. But I think that's where he can be tremendously effective. And what's also interesting about this offense in general, and I'm sure we'll get into Jeff Grimes' offense, but a lot of 2 tight end sets, which we knew was going to be the case because it's what he's done at previous stops. I just really like the combo of Tanner Koziel and Tucker Ashcraft out there. And they're not the only 2 tight ends that we're going to see, because Jackson Aker has been moved to a tight end. Grant Steck is getting some run. We really liked him coming out of high school. So they got some bodies there, but Koziel certainly stands out because, as we've said, he is the best playmaking tight end they've had since Jake Ferguson, who left 4 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. The Tucker Ashcraft to number 11 thing, big time Owen Daniels vibes right there, just because both tall, both tight ends, both number 11. So that's we'll see if he has an OD type of last couple of years here. But overreaction or no for this position, overreaction or no, Tanner Koziel will lead Wisconsin in receptions this year.
No, not an overreaction.
Really?
I feel like if they need an outlet and they need 5 yards, he's going to be the guy they go to. But obviously, Vinny Anthony and Trecz Kahuna, if he's healthy, are certainly going to be the conversation. I just think the way this offense is designed, if you're going to throw the ball, he's the perfect player to take advantage of some of those situations. Like 3rd and short, man, just get him the ball.
Offensive line. Wisconsin came into this, we felt, with 4 spots that felt pretty established, right? Right tackle Riley Mahlman, center Jake Renfro, left guard Joe Brunner, and left tackle Kevin Haywood. And at this point, that's perfectly what has happened, especially at least on Tuesday. But the right guard spot is a little bit different. And yesterday, I saw Emerson Mandel there, and I was like, I asked you, has he been there all camp? Has he been the number 1 guy? And the answer was no.
Yeah, AJ Blazek very clearly is looking at that spot as an open competition, which makes sense. The first practice, they had JP Benchwall there. The second practice, they had Kerry Kadinko there. And the third practice, they had Emerson Mandel. Now, between those 3, I think you could say Mandel has the highest upside. Benchwall has been there, has the most game experience, but it's not a ton of game experience. I think he's played 60-something snaps in his career. I think 40 plus were at right guard last year. But this is the position that I think Mandel was built for. We'll see who takes advantage of it. The good news is they've got some depth there, even if it isn't a ton of experience.
Yeah. Colton did it. Colton Bartholomew, who's a offensive lineman nerd, that's a term of endearment, I think, because he's a guy that understands offensive line play. And so kind of have to, I lean on him at times to learn about that type of stuff. And he broke it down pretty good yesterday on on his article up at badgerextra.com. Sorry, not trying to push the competition. I apologize, Jesse. But he breaks it down really well on where kind of the offensive line thing stands and what some of the maybe limitations are right now of Emerson Mandel, but obviously a big body that did a lot of a lot of run blocking in high school and not a ton of pass blocking. So I think it's more of a continued learning process for him. But that said, overreaction or no, Emerson Mandel will be the starting right guard on, what is it, September 1st? No, August what? August 30th?
August 28th. Now that this is a Thursday game.
August 28th. Overreaction or no?
I think I'll pick JP Benchwall.
Okay, so it's an overreaction.
Yeah.
All right. To the defensive line we go. There are more new faces here than anywhere else on the roster. There are so many guys, and they're all rotating in. It's probably been difficult for everyone to keep up with all the different things that we've been seeing, whether it's 4 guys with their hand on the ground, 3 guys with their hand on the ground. Haven't seen a ton of nickel because Wisconsin's offense haven't seen a ton of that from Wisconsin's offense, forcing them into nickel at this point. But the initial impressions of some of the new defensive linemen.
That is the hardest position to keep track of, without a doubt. And on day one, they were rotating like every other play. So they are using different combinations all the time. It's a little tough to get a read on what they're thinking, other than this feels like a year where they maybe truly have the number of bodies they want to be able to rotate. But like, you got 2 main interior guys. Just depends who they have out there. So it's Ben Barton. Javier Suggs was kind of the first up on Tuesday, but Charles Perkins has had that spot. They have these. I understand now why they define certain guys as edge players, because Corey Walker, Michael Garner, when Wisconsin got them, it's like, okay, defensive linemen, but how are they utilizing them? You put them on the edge and they can do some different things. Maybe they're stand up, maybe they have their hand on the ground. So they're definitely trying to do some different things because they're bigger, because maybe now there's more size off the edge, and because they were absolutely dead last in tackles for a loss a year ago at 3.5 a game. You got to do something different. So, I mean, you can go on down the list. Brandon Lane's been in there. They've gotten Dylan Johnson a lot of reps. So it's interesting to see, but nothing obviously is set in stone at that position by any stretch.
Impossible not to notice the size difference though from last year, right? Like it's impressive. And I'll even say, like, there's some guys, I want to say it was Michael Garner yesterday, when he was walking by, it lists him at 300 pounds. He doesn't look 300 pounds. So I feel like they have some different body types, even if they are all right around 300 or more, like 295 to 315 or 330, whatever it is. They're different body types. They don't all look the same, and so it's a interesting group. And you mentioned the tackles for loss. Wisconsin will have more tackles for loss per game than they did last year.
They damn well better.
Overreaction or no? Is that an overreaction or no?
Not an overreaction, because if they're worse, God help everyone.
Going to linebacker, obviously there's edge guys, and then there's what they're just calling them linebackers. But right now it's been the Taka Curtis and Christian Allegro show in the middle for sure at this point.
Yep. Aaron Witt is getting a lot of run there. It's interesting. They've moved him more off the ball. Daryl Peterson, as we talked about, was going to have his hand in the ground, so he's playing up more. But the middle looks kind of like, I feel like what Mike Tressel would have, I don't know, always wanted, or what they did at Cincinnati to some degree, where you have those players. And there's a lot of rotations too, because Antoine Turner is a transfer, has gotten some run, especially with the twos. Thomas Heiberger is in there. So I like what they have there. Tyrese Fearbry, who can also come off the edge, and he had a couple would-be sacks on Tuesday, so he really stood out. They've got some different body types, and Witt, I think maybe that's a better spot for Witt. There was a play where I think he stuffed Dylan Jones around the edge for no gain, and everybody was celebrating with him. And Allegro had a play where they they tossed it to Dupree, and it must have gone for a 7-yard loss. He absolutely read it perfectly. So they have playmakers there. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions, obviously, because John Pius and Leon Lowry were tremendous last spring and barely showed up, it felt like, during the season. I will say, though, that it's very clear that based on the structure of the defense and the personnel that they've got, they're trying to address what the shortcomings have been, and it feels like they're at least better positioned to have success. So there's a start.
So just based on formation at this point, you could make an argument that if you broke it down in terms of positions and what they're listed at, it might be considered a 3-3-5. but it feels more like a 4-3 to this point from what we've seen, because they haven't gone to a lot of nickel. So, but I'm wondering if they just stick with the 4 and go to 4-2-5 as opposed to, being in a true 3-3-5. I feel like that is obviously the 3-3-5 is what they ran at Cincinnati. Either they didn't think they had the personnel to do it, which maybe they probably didn't. But I feel like keeping 3 defensive linemen on the field more this year as opposed to what they did last year is paramount to them having success.
Yeah,
We
I
saw
agree.
it, like I know it puts you at a disadvantage at times elsewhere, right? But that's why you have athletes at linebacker too that can, run around and make plays. But I feel like the more often they have 4 defensive linemen on the field, or at least 3, is certainly going to be something that's going to help them stop the run. And it all starts with stopping the run. It's just as obvious as anything has ever been. Stop the run on first and second down, get after the quarterback on third. And Wisconsin just did not do that well enough last year.
That strikes me as paramount, because you just cannot have what happened against Iowa. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, after I talked with Brady Collins, they're doing a lot of drills where they're reminded of both Iowa and Minnesota, but specifically Iowa. Like after practice when they're doing push-ups, they're kind of like Iowa push-ups, because you got to do 42 for the points you gave up. And that's not because of the offense, which also wasn't great. So you just got to be more stout. And even if they have 3 guys up there, they're all capable of doing something a little bit different. So I think that's definitely going to be something we'll see moving forward.
Overreaction or no, Christian Allegro is going to be so good that they retire the number 0.
Overreaction.
But do you think he's the guy that ends up leading them in tackles?
Tough question. I suppose I'd say yes. I think so. He looks the part, and if you have to pick one guy, he's a good one to pick.
Yeah, a lot of new faces in the secondary as well, right?
Yeah.
We know, but when you look at the starters, at least the top 4, familiar names: Ricardo Hallman, Nazir Forkring, Preston Zachman, and Austin Brown. And then another, I guess, familiar name if you pay close attention to the team, and Owen Arnett as a slot corner. What have you liked, and what questions do you still have though about the defensive backfield?
Well, I think Nazir was tremendous on Tuesday. Had a couple of pass breakups. One of them, when they were in the red zone, it was a pass intended for a receiver like 10 yards over Forkring's head, and he just, man, I don't know what his vert was on that, but he got up there and knocked the ball away. So he's been very good. It's kind of as you would expect with that group. The thing I'm interested to see is, what does Wisconsin ultimately do with the nickel spot, the nickel corner spot? Because yes, Owen Arnett, when they do it, and they've done it a lot less early on because of what Wisconsin's offense has looked like, but he's been the first guy up, and Raphael Dunn, who's a redshirt freshman, has been the second guy up. Very lengthy body, came in as a safety, obviously has versatility. I wonder whether Owen will be able to hold on to that, or whether, because they got really good transfers at safety, they'll be able to shuffle some things around. Because the group that's generally gone second is Matthew Traynor and Matt Young, who is the transfer from Bethel, got an interception on day 1, which is no surprise if you saw what he did on film. Like, does one of those guys emerge as a potential starter so Austin Brown can go and play the nickel corner spot, or did they just feel really good about Brown back there and Arnett in the slot? I think that's one thing that I'll be watching moving forward.
So there's a couple guys at corner too that are new in Latimer and Deone Hill, and then you also have a young guy in Jay Harper, and certainly Emilio Agard is there as well. Those guys are all probably, those names I listed off are probably like your second and third team at this point.
Yeah, largely I think I've seen Agard and Latimer on the outside with the 2s, but Harper has gotten some run, and he's made a couple good plays. He made a great play on a one-on-one with Ballard. So they have some bodies there for sure. I certainly think Latimer is going to get a ton of run this season, because he played more snaps than any corner on the roster a year ago. Granted, it was at a lower level than in the Big Ten, but they've got some good bodies there, and some of those young guys like Agard and Harper are certainly in the mix.
So the the special teams wise, as you illustrated, I think in your article on Tuesday or Thursday or Saturday, Nathaniel Vakos did not have a great year last year, but he got off to a good start in the first day, and then saw him kick yesterday was pretty good too.
Yeah, I don't think he's missed in the portions that we've seen. He did. I didn't see him kick on day 2. I think they gave
Gavin Lom
got the first ones, but he's been great, hasn't missed. And Lom has a tremendously strong leg. Both those guys made all their kicks on Tuesday. So that's certainly what you need out of that. You need certainty. And Vaco's had his least productive season a year ago in the 3 that he's been playing, largely from the 30 to 49 range. He got better on 50 plus, but so far so good.
And then punting wise, Atticus Bertram's and the transfer from Michigan.
Yeah, Stone Anderson's been handling the 2s, but Bertram's, we talked about him last season. Maybe was the MVP. Certainly one of the top players, which is
not ideal.
Tells you all you need to know about last season. But the other thing are the punt returners, because that's always fun to watch. Is who's in that mix. Tretch was before he got hurt. Tyrell Anthony, those two make a lot of sense. Vinny Anthony, I think, has been in there, and Jaden Ballard. So that's an interesting one, because if you've got starters, do you also want him handling that role, or could someone like a Henry take it? Now, Henry did it a little bit last year, but obviously lost the muffed a punt against USC, and then Hunter Wohler ended up kind of being the guy. So they've got some options there.
They do. Kick return, have we seen any?
Haven't seen any kick return at this point.
Yeah. One notable thing, holder-wise, Gavin Myers was the holder for Nathaniel Vakos last year. Now it's Atticus Bertram. So at least noteworthy there. And then long snapper. Got anything for me on that?
That one I haven't paid attention to. So sorry, everybody. I'll look.
There's a new one, right? Obviously. So
yeah, because they had Case and Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Who's gone.
All right. Let's jump into some listener questions so we can, and there's certainly questions about the offense and what it looks like. So we can jump into what Jeff Grimes has done. So we'll go with A plus here. It says, does the offense at least look average? Now, yeah. So I was in Indy on Thursday, and is it okay if I say this?
Yeah, I don't even remember what I said, but
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
I'm not saying you're going to the playoff.
I was obviously in Indy last week during the first practice, and I asked, or no, you said the offense today was better than anything Longo had in practice. I know you were joking. I know it was a little over the top, but I found it funny, and it was good. But that said, it is different. It's definitely different, and there are things that people will recognize certainly more than maybe they did the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think the way I phrased it in the first practice report I did off day 1 is that it just looked so much further ahead and maybe to a degree competent. But that also makes sense just because the transition to what they did in that air raid was so much different. It was going to take a while, but this just looks and feels like the offense they were supposed to have. And I guess that's with the benefit of hindsight, knowing what didn't happen the last 2 years, because it's not like Longo didn't arrive to tremendous fanfare about what was possible, but they are still able to do some of those things. They are still able to go to an empty backfield and complete a pass if they need to. It's just that you are going to see a lot more 2 tight end sets. I feel as though there's been so much more movement, whether, pre-snap, whatever can be done to test the defense and move their eyes. And they do it so much that even if it doesn't end up being utilized on a given play, it might be utilized on the next play. It's to set things up for the future. So sometimes you even see a fullback. so it's it just looks like what it was supposed to be. Now, that I don't know what degree of success it's going to achieve next season, but I will say it feels as though it is functioning in a much more smooth fashion early on. And some of that, as Luke Fickell talked about after day 1, was the amount of time they spent prepping for that first practice. Obviously, they had an extra month to try and think about what they wanted to do because they didn't reach a bowl game. But once they brought Grimes in, he said that Fickell said they spent a lot more time in the classroom and doing different walkthroughs. It kind of felt like you could see it in day 1.
Yeah. They also had like those OTAs, essentially OTAs, leading into that. It feels like you can hit the ground faster when you have that. I don't know that they've had. I don't know if they've done that in the past. I know they did it for fall camp last year. I know. Actually, I think the last 2 years, I didn't know that they did it for spring as well, but that I think certainly helps you be able to look competent on day one if you've been running these things at least at half speed. So that's for sure. Brendan asks, how do the running backs look running the wide zone? Are they reading the blocks well?
That is a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Look. I think I don't know that I saw like when Darian Dupree when he first got in there last year. It didn't feel like he was reading things very well. Maybe he felt sped up. Maybe he felt uncomfortable with what he was seeing. But I think certainly towards the end of last season, he looked more comfortable. And at least in the one practice that I saw, certainly the case. I think Cade Giacomelli sees it very well and look good and burst through holes. And Dylan Jones, I'm sure will, again, I didn't see a ton from him yesterday, but I think all three of those guys are probably more comfortable reading stuff like this as opposed to perhaps maybe that they were looking at last year.
I think you can say that in general for just the entire offense, and even this is a different part of it, but the routes that the wide receivers are running. I mean, it's not, hey, run to open space, which is really tough to do. Excuse me, if you've never done it before. So things just look a little bit more crisp is the best way to put it.
Jack asks, how different are the formations we're seeing on either side of the ball?
Well, I think we're limited in specific formations, but we've certainly touched on a number of things. I think defensively, it definitely looks different, which we've addressed, and absolutely offensively. Because again, we knew that Grimes, 11 personnel was the number one thing he ran a year ago at Kansas, but 12 personnel was used a ton. So it's just, I'd say it is significantly different from what we saw a year ago. And the variety that they have in place this early is noteworthy too.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing that stood out for me yesterday was just the motion and the ability to get eyes going and the eyes of the defense in a bunch of different places, as opposed to being able to just zero in on one thing. And a lot of things look the same, and the outcome of the play is different, just based on, again, that was what Paul Chryst was so good at for so long.
Yes.
Running the same thing, but making it look different. Coming out in the same thing and then running a different type of play. The same formation, same motion, but you can run how many different things off of that play. And he was so good at that for so long. They did not have that the last 2 years. The lack of motion obviously was very, very noticeable. I feel like every single play, maybe not, maybe this is a little bit hyperbole, but it feels like almost every play there's going to be motion one way or the other, just to get a read on the defense, to get a read, to force the defense to react and to force them to show their hand maybe a little bit. Motion helps extensively in that. So
there are a lot of things that remind me of Paul Chryst era offense with these Badgers. And the number of ways they can get people involved, including wide receivers and multiple wide receivers. So I think that's got to be encouraging, because you wanted to blend some of the passing concepts with the things we're used to seeing when Wisconsin was most effective.
Yes. And you mentioned Tanner Koziel being the best playmaking tight end that they've had since Jake Ferguson. Saw some Jake Ferguson plays yesterday too. Ones that perhaps were used for him and tight ends previous to him. All right. What else we got? Luke asked, standout offensive and defensive players through 3 days. You give me two on both sides. I know we probably already talked about a bunch of them, but just ones that right when you start to think about it, who pops up?
It's hard through 3 practices because there hasn't been a ton, but I mean, Koziel certainly, because of the reasons we laid out. Other than that, I don't know. Like
one more offensive player.
Well, it's not really fair, but I really liked Eugene Hilton on Saturday. It's just that it came against the threes. But I will say he had 3 catches that you were like, whoa. And maybe I mentioned this earlier, but he had one Two of them came from Carter Smith, but he had one on a rollout so Danny O'Neal rolled out to his right, and Wisconsin put this on its social media account, but like just ripped the ball out of the air. I think Jay Harper was in coverage there, and then the other two went for 50-yard touchdowns. One of them was a ball that was 40 yards in the air from Carter Smith. The other one went about 20 yards in the air, but he made the catch and got behind the defense and scored. So that doesn't mean I'm saying he's the best wide receiver right now, but I don't know that there have been a ton of situations early where a specific guy flashed consistently. And I didn't really see a ton of him in terms of great plays on Tuesday, but that is one thing that certainly stood out to me on Saturday.
Defense. Do you have a couple guys that have jumped out to you on defense?
I don't know if he's made a ton of plays, but I just really like Corey Walker in the spot that they have him in. Was listed at 270 pounds at Western Michigan a year ago. He's listed at 297 pounds now. They've got him playing on the edge. I think he can do some different things. I just think he's going to end up being so important to Wisconsin's ability to try and set the edge. So it's not like he went in and got 4 sacks. I just really like what he could provide there. Beyond that, you could go down the list on the back end. I think Nizier has been really good. I think Allegro has been good, and Fearbury had a couple sacks on Tuesday. So they have some different playmakers. Now, whether that leads to more in the season remains to be seen.
Marcus asks, biggest surprise so far, a few practices in?
Well, that's a good question. I think Jaden Ballard has surprised me a little bit. Just because I didn't know what to expect with him. He had 11 catches in 4 years at Ohio State, but it just feels like he's got some of that ability to take the top off the defense. Again, not necessarily a ton of huge plays, but feels like he's got a real good shot very early on to earn that spot. And still looking to see more out of Mark Hamper, but he made some plays on day one too.
Chris asks, one player on the roster has 5 sacks this year. You taking the over or under? If over, who? If under, we're in trouble.
Who was the leading sack getter this past season?
I don't know.
I don't remember either.
It wasn't anything impressive because they were like dead last in sacks as well.
Yeah. Oh boy. I guess I'll take the under. I think this is a course correction, maybe. This which always ends up happening. So I need to see it before I'm going to make that proclamation.
Christian Allegro and Elijah Hills tied for the lead with 3.
Yeah. I'll take the under, but maybe they have more guys with 3 and 4 sacks. How about that?
You're going to take the under on 5?
I don't know who I would pick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the guy that you would pick, at least originally, would be, or I should say going into last year, you would have said Darrell Peterson because he had 5.5 in 2023, and you figured like he was going to take a jump, and it just, for a variety of reasons, I think, him being asked to do certain things, he had 1 sack, right? He had it just didn't work out. He's a guy that's put on some weight. He's a guy that I don't know that it's a tough question, and one that we don't want to answer like in stone, because what we saw last year in fall camp, or I should say in spring ball and fall camp, never played out on the field. So I would just, with Leon Lowry and John Pius. So I would just probably say I'm going to take the over. I just think that there is somebody out there that's going to have at least 5 sacks. 3 sacks is very, very few. And I don't know that Wisconsin defensively, if they're not getting the pressure that they need to, it's going to be a very, very tough year again. No disruption in the backfield whatsoever from the defensive line and the linebackers last year. And we saw what happened. And it wasn't just getting run over. It was just asking your DBs to play too much coverage for too long.
Here's the other thing that I'm thinking about if we're going to talk specifically about statistics is the level of competition Wisconsin has to play in a lot of those games is how many are going to be available in some of these matchups. But obviously, if Wisconsin is going to be a better team, you got to force the issue defensively, which they were not able to do a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more here. Kevin says he's a couple episodes behind, so he's not sure if this has already been asked yet. But if Wisconsin makes a bowl this season, is Fickell's seat no longer hot? And I guess I would answer that question with his seat's not hot.
No, not right now.
Right. You go 2-10. Could be a little hot.
Yeah. So what?
But I don't envision
6-6.
Again, I don't envision that getting to 6-6, and I know you don't think that's a possibility.
That they get to 6-6?
You think they can get? You think they're going to get to 6-6?
Not right now, but
yeah, exactly.
I see a path to it. Like, we're not
okay.
talking about something that's completely improbable.
Okay. All right.
I'm just gonna learn my lesson from. I'm not even gonna say learn my lesson. Like, I didn't think they were going to be great last year. I said they'd go 7-5 because I thought they beat Minnesota and Iowa. No, and Nebraska. I thought they'd lose to Iowa, and they turned out to be worse than that. But no, I don't. Yeah, the seat is not hot. I do wonder, though, and maybe this is a question for a different episode, what is the record that you would need to have for it to not be hot going into year 4?
Oh, that's a good question. I think
is 5-7 good enough? Back-to-back 5-7s?
It depends who those 5 wins are against.
Mm-hmm.
Say you beat Alabama. Say you beat Ohio State. Say you beat Oregon.
Yeah.
Like, what if you beat those teams, but then you lose some of the other ones that maybe you should win? I don't know. They have yet to win a big game. And I know people don't like necessarily hearing that because what is that?
3 wins against teams that finished a season with a winning record in 2 years.
Yep.
Rutgers twice and FCS South Dakota.
Wisconsin hasn't beaten a ranked team since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So didn't do it in 22 and came close a couple times these last couple years against the better teams that they played, just couldn't get it done. So do you have a win total out there yet?
Of what I think their record's going to be?
Yeah, because
I'm going to wait until our season preview episode in August.
All right. Over under 5.5.
Get back to me in August.
All right. So Wisconsin's on the field again Thursday. It is not open to the media. They will be back after spring break. So whatever that is, the first week of April. And we'll be able to see a little bit more as spring ball continues leading into the April 19th spring game. I don't know. Have they given that a name yet? The launch times 3 or something like that?
I think they've done away with that after year 1.
Really? That's surprising. I thought people really were warm to that. Sorry, that was rude. Yeah.
No, it's not. There were 4 interceptions, including 3 on the first 3 drives.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal. The weather, the only thing more brutal than the play was the weather, and it was very close. So, but yeah, spring game back April 19th. And they actually feels like they're giving a little tap on the back to season ticket holders. It's free for season ticket holders. It's and students, I think, and then it's like $5 to get in. So yeah, I think they're trying to at least have some good PR when it comes to some of the season ticket holders and some of the fans that I think have been rightly very vocal in some of their distaste for some of the stuff coming out of the athletic department. The bricks. I'm not talking about anything serious, but like the bricks and that type of stuff. So, all right, going to stop talking now. We will be back at some point to talk more about spring ball. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Can.